Hi, I'm Riley Camden, 29, standing in my grandmother's rose garden as the lawyer reads her will. Mom clutches her pearls like they're prayer beads. Dad checks his Rolex twice in 30 seconds. The words hit like thunder. I leave my estate, worth $18.7 million, to Riley. Mom's champagne glass shatters on the brick patio. Dad whispers, "This can't be right." My sister Amber screams, "I'm a manipulative snake." Let us know in the comments where you're watching. If this resonated, don't miss out on subscribing because tomorrow I'm sharing something that will completely change how you think about this topic. Let me take you back to where this all began because this moment didn't happen overnight. It started when I was 7 years old in our kitchen in Millbrook Heights, Connecticut. I had just returned from the regional spelling bee, clutching my first place trophy like it was made of gold. The local newspaper wanted to interview me, the youngest winner in state history. I burst through our front door, practically glowing with excitement. "Mom! Dad! I won! I actually won!" The trophy felt heavy in my small hands, solid proof that I was special, that I mattered. I found them in the living room where Amber was practicing her violin, badly. She was hitting more wrong notes than right ones, but they sat there nodding encouragingly. "That's wonderful, sweetie," Mom said without looking up from Amber's sheet music. "Amber, try that passage again. Your recital is next week." Dad glanced over briefly. "Good job, kiddo. Now let your sister concentrate." My trophy suddenly felt like it weighed nothing at all. I set it on the kitchen counter next to the fruit bowl, where it stayed for exactly 3 days before Mom moved it to my bedroom shelf to make room. But Amber's participation ribbon from her violin recital, that got framed and hung in the hallway where everyone could see it. That pattern became the soundtrack of my childhood. When I was 9, I built a working volcano for the science fair that actually impressed the high school chemistry teacher. I stayed up for 3 nights straight, mixing compounds, painting paper mache, writing detailed explanation cards. The night before the fair, I found my project destroyed in the garage. Baking soda and vinegar everywhere, my carefully painted mountain cracked in half. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry," Mom said, not sounding sorry at all. Amber was looking for her art supplies. Accidents happen. Amber smirked from behind her cereal bowl. "Maybe next time don't leave important stuff where people can bump into it." I rebuilt what I could with duct tape and determination. I still won second place, but Mom was too busy helping Amber set up her watercolor display to notice. Every birthday drove the knife deeper. Mine meant homemade cake and a small gift, usually something practical like school supplies or clothes I needed anyway. Amber's meant elaborate themed parties, professional photographers, and wish lists fulfilled down to the last expensive item. When I turned 12, I asked for a beginner's camera, dreaming of becoming a photographer. Mom handed me a disposable one from the drugstore. "This will help you learn the basics first." 2 months later, Amber mentioned she might like photography. A professional Canon camera appeared on her dresser within the week, complete with 3 different lenses and a carrying case. "She has such an artistic eye," Dad explained when I stared at it. "We want to nurture her creativity." What about my creativity? What about nurturing me? High school made everything worse. I threw myself into debate team, academic decathlon, student government, anything that might finally make them proud. I won the state championship in forensics, giving a speech about family dynamics that now seems painfully ironic. The local news interviewed me again. I practiced my answers, hoping they'd watch the segment together on the couch. Instead, they scheduled a family dinner at Amber's favorite restaurant the same night, celebrating her getting a call back for the school musical. She hadn't even gotten the part yet, just the callback. But that potential success mattered more than my actual victory. I watched my interview alone in my bedroom on my laptop, the volume turned low so I wouldn't disturb Amber's singing practice down the stairs. College became my escape route. I earned a full academic scholarship to Northwestern University, majoring in journalism with a minor in business. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who valued intelligence, who rewarded hard work, who noticed when someone excelled. I flourished there, writing for the campus newspaper, interning at Chicago Tribune during summers, building a portfolio that made professors nod with approval. But even from 200 miles away, the family dynamics followed me. When I called home excited about winning the university's journalism award, Mom cut me off mid-sentence. "That's nice, dear. Did you hear Amber got cast as Emily in our town? The lead role? We're so proud." When I mentioned my internship at the Tribune might lead to a job offer, Dad said, "Just remember, not everyone can be a starving artist like your sister. Someone in this family needs to be practical." Amber had dropped out of college twice by then, each time to pursue her passion in a new field. First it was theater, then photography, then interior design. Each career change came with family meetings about supporting her dreams and my parents writing checks for equipment, classes, or networking events that never seemed to lead anywhere. Meanwhile, I was working 3 part-time jobs to cover my living expenses, determined to graduate debt-free and prove I could make it on my own. I succeeded, but the victory felt hollow when I walked across that stage and saw 2 empty seats where my family should have been. They were at Amber's art gallery opening in Millbrook Heights, her first, and as it turned out, her last. Standing here now in Grandma Rose's garden, watching my family's shocked faces, I finally understand what she saw that they never did. She saw the granddaughter who called every Sunday, who remembered her birthday, who listened to her stories about growing up during the Great Depression. She saw the one who visited not when it was convenient, but when it mattered. They're about to learn that love isn't inherited, it's earned. If you're loving what you're hearing, smash that subscribe button. It really keeps us going. All right, let's jump back in. The aftermath of that spelling bee trophy gathering dust was just the beginning. By middle school, I had learned to expect nothing and still somehow end up disappointed. But something shifted inside me when I turned 13, the year everything changed forever. It started with Grandma Rose's weekly Sunday dinners at her estate in Cedar Hollow. While Mom and Dad fawned over Amber's latest artistic phase, she was into pottery that month, I would slip away to Grandma's study. The room smelled like old leather and lavender, filled with business books and framed photos of the family's printing company that built our fortune. "You have your grandfather's mind," Grandma would say, watching me flip through her accounting ledgers with genuine curiosity. He could see patterns where others saw chaos. She began teaching me about investments, compound interest, market trends, things that made Amber's eyes glaze over but fascinated me completely. "Don't tell your parents," she'd whisper conspiratorially. "Let this be our little secret." I started a notebook that year, documenting everything, not just the financial lessons Grandma taught me, but the slights, the forgotten moments, the casual cruelty disguised as family love. January 15th, missed my honor roll ceremony to attend Amber's pottery class showcase where she displayed 3 lopsided bowls. March 22nd, Mom forgot to pack me lunch for the academic competition, but remembered Amber's special gluten-free snacks for drama club. The entries multiplied like compound interest. At 14, I discovered something that changed my trajectory entirely. Hidden in Grandma's desk drawer, I found incorporation papers for a company called Phoenix Publications, registered under my name. She had been setting aside money from the family business, creating a trust fund nobody knew existed. When you're 18, this becomes yours. Your parents don't know, and they don't need to. This is for the granddaughter who shows up, not the one who poses. That's when I started my double life. Publicly, I remained the responsible, invisible daughter. I kept my grades up, did my chores, attended every one of Amber's performances with a supportive smile plastered on my face. But privately, I began building something they couldn't touch. I started freelance writing under the pen name Sam Parker, crafting articles about financial literacy for teen magazines. The checks were small, $50 here, $100 there, but I deposited every penny into a separate account Grandma helped me open. While Amber was spending hundreds of Mom and Dad's money on art supplies that would collect dust within months, I was learning the value of every dollar earned. High school intensified everything. Amber's failures became more expensive. When her photography phase crashed after she spent $3,000 on equipment, Mom and Dad covered her credit card debt without question. When her interior design certificate program ended with her dropping out halfway through, they paid the remaining tuition so it wouldn't affect her credit.
Meanwhile, I was working at Henderson's bookstore every weekend, saving money and studying business books during slow hours. Mr. Henderson, the owner, became an unlikely mentor. He taught me about profit margins, customer service, inventory management, real-world skills my expensive private school never covered. "You've got something special, Riley," he'd say, watching me reorganize his chaotic filing system. "You see solutions where most people see problems." College was supposed to be my escape, but Amber found ways to sabotage even that. During my freshman year at Northwestern, she convinced my parents I was getting too big for my britches and becoming uppity from city life. Suddenly, my weekly call home became an interrogation about my new friends, my professors, my big city attitude. When I landed the Tribune internship, Amber called me directly. "Mom's worried you're going to abandon the family," she said with fake concern. "Maybe you should come home more often, show them you still care about us little people." But I had learned to play a different game by then. During winter break of my sophomore year, I pitched an article to Connecticut Business Journal about successful family businesses navigating generational transitions. I interviewed 3 local companies, including some of our competitors. The article got published and caught Grandma's attention immediately. "Brilliant strategy," she said over our secret Sunday afternoon tea. "Understanding the competition while building your own credentials. Your grandfather would be proud." That's when she revealed the full scope of Phoenix Publications. What started as a small trust fund had grown into a legitimate media company with contracts for corporate newsletters, annual reports, and marketing materials, all operating under my pen name, all generating income that my parents never suspected existed. By junior year, I was making more money than many of my professors. I had learned to keep 2 separate lives perfectly balanced: the struggling college student my parents expected to see, and the successful young entrepreneur building wealth in the shadows.
The hardest part wasn't the secrecy. It was watching Amber's continued failures drain my parents' resources while they remained blind to their older daughter's growing success. When she decided to become a life coach despite having never successfully managed her own life, they funded her certification courses and website development. $8,000 disappeared into another of her half-baked dreams. I documented it all. Every check written, every opportunity missed, every double standard applied. My notebook had grown into multiple volumes by then, creating an undeniable record of 22 years of systematic favoritism. Senior year brought the ultimate test. I received offers for full-time positions at both the Chicago Tribune and Wall Street Journal, dream jobs that would launch my career into the stratosphere. But I also knew Grandma's health was declining, and someone needed to be positioned to protect what she had built. I chose a third option that nobody saw coming. I took a remote position with the Hartford Courier, Connecticut's premier business publication, allowing me to move back to Millbrook Heights while maintaining my independence. Publicly, I was the daughter who came home to help with family business and care for Grandma. Privately, I was positioning myself to inherit and protect a multi-million-dollar empire. Amber celebrated my return as proof that she was right about my big city phase being temporary. Mom and Dad saw it as me finally coming to my senses. Only Grandma knew the real reason, and she smiled with satisfaction every time she saw me setting up my home office. "Perfect timing," she whispered during one of our lost conversations. "The board meets next month to approve the succession plan. Everything we built together is about to pay dividends." I had no idea how literally she meant that until 3 weeks later, standing in her rose garden, watching my family's world explode in slow motion. 22 years of preparation was about to be put to the test. The lawyer's words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. $18.7 million to Riley Camden. For a moment, the only sound was the fountain bubbling in Grandma's garden and Mom's shattered champagne glass crunching under Dad's shifting feet. Then chaos erupted. "This is impossible," Dad sputtered, his face turning the same shade of red as Grandma's prize roses. Mother was confused at the end. Everyone knows that. She had episodes, memory problems. This will is clearly the product of manipulation.
Amber shot to her feet so fast her chair toppled backward. She poisoned Grandma against us. Riley has been playing some sick long game, pretending to care while the rest of us were living our authentic lives. Her voice cracked with the particular fury of someone who had never been denied anything important. Mom stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Then her lawyer instincts kicked in. We need to see the documentation. This reeks of undue influence. Riley had access, opportunity, and clear motive to manipulate a vulnerable elderly woman. Mr. Whitfield, Grandma's attorney, adjusted his glasses with practiced calm. He had obviously anticipated this reaction. Mrs. Camden, I have 43 years of legal experience, and I can assure you this will was prepared with extraordinary care. Mrs. Rose Camden was of completely sound mind, underwent psychological evaluation by 2 independent physicians, and specifically addressed the concerns you're raising. He pulled out a thick folder. He also prepared video testimony, recorded just 6 months ago, explaining her reasoning in detail. Would you like me to play it now, or would you prefer to review the written documentation first? Play it, I said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at me like I had materialized from thin air. For the past 10 minutes, I had been invisible again, watching my family implode while I stood perfectly still. Mr. Whitfield nodded and pulled out a tablet, positioning it on the garden table where we could all see it. Grandma's face appeared on screen, sitting in her favorite armchair in the study where she had taught me everything about business. She looked directly into the camera with the sharp, intelligent eyes that had built an empire from a small-town print shop. If you're watching this, I'm gone, and my family is probably losing their minds over my final decision. Let me be crystal clear about something. I was completely sane when I made this will, and every choice was deliberate. Mom made a strangled sound. Dad was gripping the back of his chair so hard his knuckles had gone white. For 29 years, I watched my granddaughters grow up. One was given every advantage, every excuse, every second chance. The other earned every opportunity through her own merit. One called me when she needed money. The other called me when she needed nothing at all. The camera seemed to look directly at each of us as she spoke. Amber, sweetheart, I watched you receive over $200,000 in gifts, loans, and bailouts from your parents over the years. Money that came from the company I built. You never once asked about the company, showed interest in learning how it operated, or demonstrated any ability to manage resources responsibly. Amber's face had gone pale, except for 2 bright red spots on her cheeks. This is character assassination from beyond the grave, she whispered. Riley, Grandma's voice continued, visited me every week for 15 years, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She listened to my stories, learned about our family history, and showed genuine interest in preserving what 3 generations built. She also demonstrated exceptional business acumen, financial responsibility, and the kind of character this family legacy requires to survive.
Mr. Whitfield paused the video. There's more, but perhaps we should review the specific terms first. Mrs. Rose Camden's estate includes the family home valued at $2.4 million, investment portfolio worth $8.9 million, the controlling interest in Camden Publishing worth approximately $6.2 million, plus various other assets totaling $1.2 million. What about us? Mom finally found her voice. What about Amber? What about our 40 years of marriage to her son? You each receive $50,000, Mr. Whitfield replied. Mrs. Camden felt that was generous, considering the advances you had already received from the family business over the years. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear the gears turning in their heads, calculating everything they had assumed would be theirs someday. Then Dad exploded. This is theft. Riley manipulated a sick old woman and stole our inheritance. We'll contest this will, drag it through every court in Connecticut. No judge will uphold this obvious fraud. Actually, Mr. Whitfield said mildly, Mrs. Camden anticipated that reaction as well. She prepared extensive documentation of every financial transaction involving family members over the past 10 years.
every loan to Amber, every business expense charged to personal accounts, every instance of using company resources for private purposes. He pulled out another folder, this one even thicker. She also retained a private investigator to document certain activities that might be relevant to any legal challenge. Mom's face went white. What kind of activities? Well, for instance, there are photographs of Amber removing items from this house during Mrs. Camden's hospital stays last year, items that were subsequently sold on various online marketplaces. There are also records of unauthorized use of company credit cards, falsified expense reports, and several other matters that might interest the district attorney if this estate battle becomes contentious. The temperature in the garden seemed to drop 10 degrees. I watched my family members exchange glances, each probably wondering what evidence existed against them specifically. "This is theft," Amber said, but her voice lacked conviction. "This is consequences," I said, speaking up for the second time. "For the first time in your life, there are actual consequences for your choices." That's when Mom snapped. She spun toward me, her face twisted with rage, and her hand connected with my cheek with a crack that echoed off the garden walls. The slap was so hard it knocked me sideways, and I tasted blood where my teeth cut into my lip. "You manipulative little snake," she hissed. "You don't deserve a penny of this money. You spent years poisoning her against her own family, playing the perfect granddaughter while plotting to steal everything we worked for." The garden went absolutely silent, except for the sound of my own breathing. My cheek burned like fire, but something cold and clear settled over me like armor. 29 years of their treatment had led to this moment. My own mother hitting me for inheriting what I had earned through genuine love and dedication. "There it is," I said, touching my lip where blood had started to pool. "The real you. The one who thinks love is a financial transaction and family is a business opportunity." The lawyer was already reaching for his phone. "I'm calling the police. Assault is assault, regardless of family relationships." "No," I said, stopping him. "Don't call anyone yet. But I want this documented. Take photos of my face, get statements from everyone who witnessed it. This conversation is being recorded per Connecticut estate law, so we have everything on tape." Mom stepped back, suddenly realizing what she had done. Dad looked like he wanted to disappear into the garden's soil. Amber just stared, probably calculating whether this would help or hurt their legal position. "Here's what happens next," I continued, still tasting blood. "You can contest the will if you want. You can waste the $50,000 Grandma left you on lawyer fees. You can drag this through court and have every sordid detail of your financial exploitation made public record. Or you can accept that a woman who built an empire from nothing was smart enough to choose the right person to continue her legacy." I looked at each of them in turn. "But either way, I'm done pretending we're a loving family. That illusion died with Grandma's last breath." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should schedule a formal reading for next week, give everyone time to process this information and consult with their own counsel if they choose." As we began to disperse, I caught sight of my reflection in the garden fountain. My cheek was already swelling, and there was blood on my lip, but my eyes looked clearer than they had in years. For the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to earn their love or prove my worth. I was finally free to be exactly who I had always been underneath their expectations. The week following the will reading felt like living in the eye of a hurricane. Mom, Dad, and Amber had retreated to strategize, while I moved into Grandma's house to begin the overwhelming process of taking inventory of my inheritance. But their silence didn't last long. It started with the Facebook post. Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with notifications. Amber had shared a lengthy post about elder abuse and predatory family members who manipulate vulnerable seniors. She didn't mention my name directly, but the implications were clear-cut. The post included a photo of her and Grandma from last Christmas, both smiling at the camera, with a caption about cherishing memories before they were stolen by greed. Within hours, the post had been shared 43 times by extended family members and family friends. My phone started ringing with calls from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years, all wanting to hear my side of the story. The local newspaper's social media manager reached out, asking if I wanted to comment on the inheritance controversy that was buzzing around Millbrook Heights. But that was just the opening act. Wednesday brought the anonymous emails to my boss at Hartford Courier. Someone had sent detailed messages claiming I had a history of financial manipulation and elder exploitation, suggesting the newspaper should investigate their employees' questionable ethics. My editor, Janet Morrison, called me into her office with a concerned expression and a printed stack of emails. "Riley, I need to ask you directly," she said, sliding the papers across her desk. "Is there any truth to these allegations? Because if there's a story here, I'd rather hear it from you than read about it in a competitor's publication." I told her everything. The whole truth about Grandma's business mentorship, the secret company we built together, the documented evidence of my family's financial exploitation. Janet listened without interruption, taking notes and occasionally raising an eyebrow. "So let me get this straight," she said when I finished. "Your grandmother essentially trained you to be her successor while documenting your family's misuse of company resources, and now they're launching a public smear campaign because they got caught?" That's the simplified version, but yes. Janet leaned back in her chair with something that looked almost like admiration. "Riley, this isn't a scandal. This is the best business succession story I've heard in 20 years. With your permission, I'd like to assign our investigative team to look into Camden Publishing's financial history. If what you're telling me is true, this could be a front-page series about family business governance and generational wealth transfer." That afternoon, I got an unexpected ally. Mrs. Eleanor Ashford, Grandma's next-door neighbor for 37 years, knocked on my door carrying a manila envelope and wearing an expression of barely contained fury. Mrs. Ashford was 74 years old, stood barely 5 feet tall, and had taught high school mathematics for 42 years before retiring. She was not someone you wanted as an enemy. "Mrs. Camden, dear, I need to show you something," she said, settling into Grandma's kitchen with the authority of someone who had been drinking tea in this house since before I was born. "I've been watching your family's social media circus, and I'm disgusted." She opened the envelope and spread out printed photographs across the kitchen table. "Your grandmother asked me to keep an eye on things during her hospital stays. I started taking pictures when I noticed some unusual activity." The photos showed Amber and a man I didn't recognize loading boxes into a white van from Grandma's back door. The timestamps showed multiple visits during the 3 weeks Grandma was hospitalized with pneumonia last fall. Other photos showed Amber going through Grandma's jewelry box, wrapping items in tissue paper and placing them in her purse. "I also have this," Mrs. Ashford continued, pulling out a small digital recorder. "Your grandmother gave this to me 6 months ago. She recorded several conversations with your parents and Amber about money. She wanted someone trustworthy to have evidence in case they tried to challenge her final decisions." We spent the next hour listening to recordings that made my stomach turn. Dad pressuring Grandma to loan him $50,000 for a sure-thing stock tip. Mom suggesting that Grandma should update her will to be fair to both granddaughters, since Amber had artistic expenses that needed consideration. Amber literally asking if she could have Grandma's diamond engagement ring early because it would mean more to me while you're still alive to see me wear it. "Your grandmother was sharper than any of them realized," Mrs. Ashford said. "She saw exactly what they were doing and documented every bit of it. She loved you, Riley, but more than that, she respected you. There's a difference." Thursday brought reinforcements I hadn't expected. Marcus Chen, Camden Publishing's head of operations, requested a meeting at the office. I had assumed he would be wary of the ownership transition, maybe even resentful that someone so young was suddenly his boss. Instead, he walked into the conference room with a stack of financial reports and a relieved expression. "Miss Camden, I need to be completely honest with you. The last 5 years have been challenging. Your parents have been treating company resources like their personal bank account, and I've been documenting everything because I was concerned about legal liability." He opened the first folder. Unauthorized salary advances, personal expenses charged to company accounts, equipment loans that never get returned. Your father has been essentially embezzling from the company he assumed he would inherit. The total is approaching $400,000. The second folder contained correspondence. I've been in contact with your grandmother's attorney for 2 years, providing financial documentation at her request. She knew exactly what was happening and was preparing to address it. Your inheritance isn't just about family dynamics. It's about saving the company from bankruptcy. Marcus pulled out the final folder. These are the contracts we've lost because of cash flow problems created by unauthorized withdrawals. Major clients who stopped working with us because we couldn't meet deadlines due to budget shortfalls. Your parents weren't just stealing from the family, they were destroying the business 3 generations built. By Friday, I had an army.
Janet Morrison's investigative team had confirmed everything through public records and industry sources. Mrs. Ashford had organized 4 other neighbors who had witnessed suspicious activities at Grandma's house. Marcus had connected me with 2 other longtime employees who had been quietly documenting financial irregularities. The Hartford Courier ran their story Friday morning with the headline, "Local Publishing Heiress Inherits Family Drama Along with Business Empire." But it wasn't the hit piece my family probably expected. Instead, it was a meticulously researched article about successful family business transitions, featuring quotes from business law experts about succession planning and corporate governance. The article mentioned the ongoing family dispute, but focused on the positive aspects: a multi-generational mentorship program, documented succession planning, and a young leader with proven business acumen taking over a respected local company. One expert quoted in the piece called it a textbook example of how family businesses should handle generational transfer. That evening, I received a text message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. This has gone far enough. Dad." I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. All those years of being invisible, of watching resources flow to Amber while I scraped for recognition. All those Sunday afternoons with Grandma, learning not just about business, but about character and legacy. I typed back, "The time for talking ended when Mom hit me. Anything further goes through lawyers." Within minutes, my phone rang. It was Dad, his voice tight with desperation. "Riley, please, we're family. Surely we can work something out that's fair to everyone. Amber has nothing now. Your mother is devastated. This inheritance, it's more money than any one person needs." "You're right," I said quietly. "It is a lot of money. And a lot of responsibility. Which is exactly why Grandma spent 15 years preparing me to handle it properly. But what about the rest of us? What about family loyalty?" I looked around Grandma's kitchen, at the photos of 4 generations of Camden family members who had built something meaningful through hard work and integrity. Family loyalty works both ways, Dad. You can't demand it from someone you've spent 30 decades ignoring. The conversation ended there, but I knew it wasn't over. They were regrouping, probably consulting lawyers, definitely planning their next move. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of their disapproval or desperate for their acceptance. I had something much more valuable than their conditional love. I had allies who believed in me, documentation that proved my worth, and a legacy that was finally mine to protect. 2 months after the Hartford Courier article ran, the lawsuit papers arrived. Just as I had predicted, Mom, Dad, and Amber were contesting the will on grounds of undue influence and diminished capacity. Their lawyer, Harrison Burke from the prestigious firm of Burke & Associates, had filed a comprehensive challenge claiming Grandma had been manipulated into disinheriting her loving family in favor of someone who had systematically isolated her from her relatives. The irony wasn't lost on me. They were paying Burke's $500 hourly rate with the $50,000 Grandma had left them, essentially using her final gift to try to steal everything else she had given me. But I wasn't the same person who had stood frozen in that garden 2 months ago. Mr. Whitfield had connected me with Patricia Santos, one of Connecticut's most respected estate attorneys, and we had been preparing for this exact scenario since the day after the will reading. "They're making this easy for us," Patricia said during our strategy meeting, spreading their legal filing across her conference table.
Look at these claims. They're arguing that your grandmother lacked mental capacity, but she underwent psychological evaluation by 2 independent physicians just 6 months before her death. They're claiming undue influence, but we have documented evidence of their own financial manipulation going back years. She pulled out another folder. Plus, they made a critical error. By filing this lawsuit, they've opened the door for us to present evidence of their misconduct that might not have been admissible otherwise. We can now subpoena bank records, company financial statements, even their personal tax returns if we can show they're relevant to the case. The discovery phase was devastating for them. Under oath, Dad had to admit to taking over $400,000 from company accounts without authorization. Mom had to acknowledge that she had advised Amber to remove items from Grandma's house during hospitalizations. Amber had to explain why she had sold Grandma's jewelry on eBay while claiming it was for safekeeping. But the most damaging testimony came from Dr. Sarah Mitchell, one of the physicians who had evaluated Grandma's mental capacity. She brought medical records showing that Grandma had scored in the 98th percentile on cognitive assessments just 4 months before her death. Mrs. Rose Camden was not only mentally competent, but she demonstrated exceptional clarity about her family relationships and business affairs. She specifically mentioned concerns about financial exploitation by family members and expressed satisfaction that she had identified a successor who shared her values and business acumen. 6 months into the legal battle, cracks began showing in their united front. The financial pressure was mounting. Burke's fees had already exceeded $60,000, and they were facing counterclaims for the money they had taken from the company over the years. Amber broke first. She showed up at my office at Camden Publishing on a rainy Thursday afternoon in March, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. Her usual confidence had been replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Riley, I need to talk to you. Alone." I led her to Grandma's old office, which I had kept exactly as she left it. The business books were still on the shelves, the family photos still on the desk, the view of Cedar Hollow still peaceful through the windows. Amber sat in the chair where she had once dismissed Grandma's stories about building the business, and now she looked around with something that might have been regret. "I want to drop out of the lawsuit," she said without preamble. "This has gone too far. The legal fees are killing us, and honestly, I've been reading the evidence, the recordings, the financial records, all of it. I didn't realize how bad things had gotten." She paused, staring at her hands. "I also didn't realize how much work you and Grandma had done together. All those Sunday visits I thought were just you being her pet, you were actually learning the business, weren't you? You earned this." It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from her, and part of me wanted to savor the moment. But I could see the exhaustion in her face, the weight of 6 months of legal battles and public scrutiny. "What do you want, Amber?" I asked quietly. "I want to make a deal. I'll withdraw from the lawsuit and testify on your behalf about Mom and Dad's financial behavior if you'll help me get my life together. Not money," she added quickly, seeing my expression. "I mean real help. Maybe a job here, starting at the bottom. A chance to learn what you learned, to be part of something meaningful instead of just drifting from one failed project to another." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agendas, but all I saw was a 31-year-old woman who had finally run out of other people's money and needed to learn how to build something for herself. "Entry-level position," I said finally. "Minimum wage, no special treatment because you're family. You work your way up like everyone else, and if you prove yourself over time, we'll talk about advancement." "Deal," she said immediately. "And Riley, I'm sorry. For everything. The sabotage, the competitions, the way I treated you growing up. You didn't deserve any of that." With Amber's defection, Mom and Dad's case crumbled quickly. Burke advised them to settle, warning that continuing the lawsuit would likely result in criminal charges for embezzlement and elder abuse. They accepted a final settlement that allowed them to keep the $50,000 Grandma had left them, but required them to pay back $200,000 to the company over time and sign agreements never to make any further claims on the estate. The day the settlement was finalized, I stood in Grandma's rose garden, my rose garden now, and called Mrs. Ashford to share the news. "I'm proud of you, dear," she said. "Your grandmother would too. You handled this with more grace than they deserved." But the real transformation came in the months that followed. Camden Publishing, freed from the drain of unauthorized expenses and family drama, began to thrive again. We won back several major contracts, hired additional staff, and launched a digital division that brought us into the 21st century. Amber kept her word. She showed up every day, worked hard, and slowly began to understand what Grandma had tried to teach all of us, that real success comes from building something meaningful, not from inheriting or demanding it. Mom and Dad made their monthly payments to the company without complaint, but we rarely spoke beyond necessary business communications. The relationship was cordial but distant, like acquaintances who happened to share a last name. A year after inheriting, I established the Rose Camden Foundation, funding scholarships for first-generation college students and grants for family-owned businesses facing succession challenges. The foundation's first recipient was a 17-year-old girl from Hartford whose brilliant science project had been overshadowed by her siblings' athletic achievements, a story that felt painfully familiar. At the foundation's launch event, I spoke about the difference between inheritance and legacy. I told the audience, inheritance is what you receive. Legacy is what you do with it. Standing at that podium, looking out at faces that included Mrs. Ashford, Marcus Chen, Janet Morrison, and even Amber in the back row, I realized something profound had shifted. For 29 years, I had been trying to earn love from people who saw relationships as transactions. Now I was surrounded by people who valued character, integrity, and mutual respect. The family that mattered wasn't the one I was born into. It was the one I had chosen and built through genuine connections and shared values. That night, alone in the house that was now truly mine, I opened Grandma's old journal and found a note she had written just weeks before her death. "Riley, if you're reading this, it means you survived their attempts to diminish you. Remember that love isn't inherited. It's earned through showing up, paying attention, and caring about something bigger than yourself. You've done that your entire life. Now, build something beautiful with what I've given you." I closed the journal and looked around at the life I had inherited and was transforming into something even better. The slap that stung my cheek in this very garden had been the final break with a family that never truly saw me. But it had also been the first moment of complete freedom to become exactly who I was meant to be. And that, I realized, was worth far more than $18.7 million. It was worth everything. Next up, 2 more stories chosen just for you. If you enjoyed this, you'll want to see what's coming. Tap to keep going.